To us car enthusiasts, the brand name Nissan harkens back memories of obviously the Nissan GTR. It's better known for making the Godzilla, cars like the excellent Nissan 350Z, the 370Z, and back in the day they used to make something called a four-door sports car, otherwise known as the Maxima, and even the Sentra SER Spec V was an awesome, excellent front-wheel drive car. Unfortunately, for the last 25 years, they've really struggled financially, and in today's video, we're going to be covering the idea that Honda might be buying them out. Hello, and welcome to the Flying Gato YouTube channel. My name is Elias, and like I said in today's video, we will be covering the Honda and Nissan possible merger. I'm very excited about that. You should be excited about that too if you're a car enthusiast. But first, a little background on myself, since this is a new segment and a new video style. If you guys like it, let me know in the comment and let me know how I can improve this for you guys. I'm really making these for you guys because I think I bring a interesting perspective on these things. And again, my background and my day job is really in the business strategy, business transformation, and people strategy space. I've worked for the top 4 of the top 10 accounting firms in the world. And what I've done for them has been based on and focused on people strategy, forecasting, getting more profitability, margin increasing margin, and just making the business run more smoothly and better. And I'm kind of generalizing here, but that's effectively what my role has been. So working for the accountants, using metrics and numbers to predict and increase the value of the firms that I've worked with. And so that's my background a little bit. And so, I love numbers. I love what the story they tell. But I also am very passionate about cars. As you guys know on this channel, I love track driving. I love driving my car. And I like talking about cars in general. So I said, why not merge both of my interests together and give you guys kind of an in-depth look of what's going on at these companies from a level or a lens that you may not be getting currently. Again, this is new for me, so let me know in the comments what you think. Let's get started with the headlines, right? So this is looking at legacy media here. This is Reuters, and the first thing we see is Nissan and Honda would drive better together, right? So they're insinuating that maybe Nissan and Honda should get together and form a partnership. What could that mean and why? Well, like I said at the beginning, Nissan has been in financial trouble basically since the late 90s. And we'll get to that history in a second. But since it's been bought out from Renault, they've had their ups, they've had their downs. And unfortunately, after COVID, they have never really recovered and they need help. And a lot of folks are saying, hey, maybe Nissan and Honda together can form a better competition for a company like Toyota. And if you scroll down a little bit here, and I like these graphs a lot, it shows you kind of a story of what's going on. So you see at the bottom here in red or orange, that's the Nissan stock price. And in blue, it's the Honda stock price. And in black is the Nikkei 225. If you know anything about the US stock market, it's effectively the New York Stock Exchange of Japan. That's Nikkei 225. Or the S&P 500, for example. That's the Nikkei 225. And you can see that Honda kind of has kept up the pace with the Nikkei, but Nissan has really fallen off the cliff, and a lot of analysts are saying that Honda would be a lot more powerful if it could, buy out a company like Nissan. I like this other headline from Forbes as well, Nissan in dire straits, but could Honda save the day? Now, in case you don't know, Nissan is in big trouble today. In fact, I don't know if it was the CFO that actually resigned today or yesterday, or if it was somebody else in the C-suite, but they've effectively told media that, hey, we have 12 to 14 months to live here. And what does that mean? It means that they have about 12 to 14 months of liquidity, right, and liquidity left so that they're able to pay off their debts and pay off their employees if things keep going the same way they've been going. If things don't markedly improve, the forecast is we're going to go bankrupt. We're not going to be able to pay our debtors, and we're going to go into bankruptcy and restructuring, and that's a terrible idea. That'd be terrible news for car enthusiasts like us. We like the Nissan GTRs, we like the 350Zs and 370Zs and the new Nissan Z. It would be a big loss to us, that we lose another Japanese company, right? And so that's why you see, Nissan in dire straits. Could Honda save the day from Forbes? I like that. So, like I said, I'm really into the numbers, and I dive, pretty deep into the numbers. And I use a website called Macro Trends. There's other websites that kind of look at financial statements. And the beauty of these companies is they're all publicly traded, so they have to issue financial statements in order to be publicly traded. That's public information. Somebody can take that and put it in a graph form, and you can see the trends. So this here, we're looking at Nissan's margins, and you can see the margins have and revenues actually also have fallen off a cliff. Now, between 2012 and 2014, there's some creative accounting there. So, we can look at a different graph here in a second, but it's important to see, at least in the revenue side, things are, they improve from '09 to about 2011 or 2012, and then they just fall off the cliff. Kind of stay flat. COVID hits, they go down almost underground, and they haven't recovered since. This is awful. This is really, really bad financially. But I like to look at the financials themselves, and I love these financial statements. This is kind of what I live and breathe here. So as you can see, we have revenue, gross profit, operating income. It just shows you basically everything you need to know about the health of your company or the company you're looking at. And then most people, or especially people like me, most people actually talk about revenues. I like to talk about net income. Net income is after all the expenses and everything are paid off, how much of that revenue that you've made is left. That tells you the health of your business, right? And here you can see net income since 2015, 2016, 2017, it went up a little bit, but it's only about 6 billion, slightly more than 6 billion in 2018. That's not very much for that much revenue. So the margin percentages are pretty bad, meaning it's not very well run, in my opinion. I'm just looking at the statements here. There's possibilities of cost cutting or restructuring that could improve margin percent, but they had 2 negative years. 2020 was a heavily negative year, and they haven't really recovered since, especially if you're looking at your net income. Net revenues, kind of a similar story. They were fairly high at 100 million from 2015 to 2020. 2020, obviously the big dip. 2021, I mean, they're improving significantly, but the cost of operations has not been great. Here's another insight that I like to see is operating expenses. Now, when you see operating expenses to become this low for this long, you start seeing a problem in development, because car companies require a lot of development money, right? You need to pay lots of engineers and consulting companies like Yamaha or other consulting companies to make your products better so they sell better in the future. A big problem with Nissan is they've not really spent that much, especially since 2020, to develop much of anything. And the things they have developed have been more centered on the European model. And let's get to that, right? So who owns Nissan? Renault owns Nissan. And that's a problem, right? So just as a comparison, we're going to look at Honda. So Honda is a small company compared to GM or Toyota or Volkswagen, but Honda, they've had a pretty good financial statement. If you look at the revenues, it's just up and up and up. And then obviously we have the 2020 dip. And by the way, this is quarterly here. But it's, again, going right back up. And their operating margins at close to 6% is really good, right? In 2020, it dipped to 2, but it means they were still profitable during 2020, the pandemic. That's pretty impressive. But effectively, since about 2013 or so, they've been around 5 to 6% profit margin. And that doesn't mean that their revenues aren't going up. I think this is a sign of a very healthy company. Keeping your margins at around 5 to 6% while revenue grows by 20, 30, 40% means that you're taking your revenue increases and you're improving your products by spending it on R&D, keeping your margins at that level, but always improving on your products more and more. To me, that's exactly what pretty much every company should be doing. If I see a company with too much in the profit margin sector, I don't think that company's due for a very long-term success story, let's say. Toyota is very interesting. Toyota, they're a much bigger company than Honda, and their revenues have gone up significantly year over year since 2009, and in 2024 and 2023, I mean, they're just killing it. They have huge amounts of revenue. And the beauty of Toyota is that they're running at around 11% profit margin. That's crazy to me. Now, I don't think those almost 12% profit margins are going to stay. They have these crazy recalls, unfortunately. Their V6s have had manufacturing issues. It's not a design issue, it's a manufacturing issue. They have since fixed that, but they're going to recall that, and it's going to cost them hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, to rectify that correctly. It's also going to cost them some sales here and there. But man, they are on a roll. They've stuck to the hybrid idea. They've perfected the hybrid idea. They were first to the market with the proper hybrid ideas. They haven't really gone crazy with the EV stuff. I think the worst selling vehicle is that pure EV, whatever it's called. I don't even know the name of it, BZRX or something like that. But no, they know what they're doing. They're a great company, and look at that, almost 12% profit margin, double-digit profit margin. And just out of curiosity, let's see if they have stopped spending on the research and development. No, they have not. You can see here the trend from 2015 to 2024. They have huge upticks in spending on R&D. So they're growing their revenues, they're growing their margins, and they're growing the profit margins and reinvesting that revenue and margins right back into the engineering of future products. To me, Toyota is one of the healthiest companies in the world, and that's just because of their financial statements. It shows me that they're spending their money on R&D, and they're bucking the worldwide trend, or really going away from this whole electrification thing. Because while electrification may work well in smaller areas like Europe, where within 4 hours you can be from France to Germany to Belgium, you could cross 6 different countries in like 3 or 4 hours. That doesn't work in the United States, right? So where I live, it's everywhere you go, it's an hour to get anywhere. Like any major city from where I live is an hour away. That's the European mind cannot comprehend. And so I like that Toyota's looking pretty healthy. But speaking of European, again, let's go back to who owns, or who's in partnership, let's say. But let's say who really owns Nissan, and that's Renault. Now, in case you don't know what Renault is a French headquartered car company. You've never heard of them because they haven't really sold cars in America. They may have done so in the 80s or 70s or something like that. Maybe it was, I don't know if Fiat did, but I don't know if Renault's ever made it to the United States. And they've certainly made some interesting cars. But if you look at their lineups today, none of their vehicles would work well in the United States. For the most part, they're all hybrid or electric, and they're just not made for a country the size of the United States. And because of that, they said, hey, back in 1999, we can buy out Nissan, we can share technologies, and we can improve both Nissan's and Renault's profit margins by selling technology through Nissan to the United States. And it worked for a little while, but then they screwed up, right? So let's go all the way back to the late 90s. Why did Nissan need to be bought out? Why did Nissan need Renault to buy them out? I found this to be very interesting because I've always respected Nissan. Everyone respects Nissan with their GTRs and their Maximas and Altimas. Back in the 90s, the Maximas were some of the best four-door cars you can buy. But let's look at their catalog. So this is the Nissan Altima. And Nissan Altima, pretty cool car back then. It was efficient. It effectively went against the Honda Accord and the Toyota Camry, and it was nice, right? It was fuel efficient. It had a 4-speed automatic if you needed it, which is kind of an old style, and it also had the manual transmission, which is awesome. Then you had the venerable Nissan Maxima. To this day, still, this Nissan Maxima is one of my favorite four-door cars ever. My brother, he used to work for General Electric, and he used to rent these cars. He'd rent a Mustang, he would rent or whatever. And I loved it when he rented the Nissan Maximas because they were super fun. They have a very powerful V6 engine in the front. Their automatics were, they were slush boxes. Obviously, this is late 90s, early 2000s. But they were awesome. They were fun. They had a lot of attitude, a lot of character. And you knew they were going to be reliable. And they were. They really were. And especially this Maxima that we're seeing here was a very reliable car. And then you look at their Sentra, another reliable car. The problem is that Sentra was competing with the Civic, right? And this generation Civic 1998, this is the EK generation. So this is the bubble Civic. It was very spacious on the inside, very fuel efficient, very fun in SI models. And it was tough for Sentra to compete with that. They had the Sentra SER, which is really cool as well. Now, the Pathfinder is a very unique Japanese product. Very few companies had, or Japanese companies had an SUV in the market. And the Pathfinder was really good, but when you're competing with the Explorer and the 4Runner, the Pathfinder wasn't really up to spec. It had really, 80s technology behind it, it had 80s motor in it, it had terrible gas mileage. And so the American consumer kind of shied away from it. And that's really, the Pathfinder was one of the only SUVs, or one of the only vehicles in the emerging SUV market that Nissan really had. Finally, you have the Nissan Frontier, which I think to today is probably the best product that Nissan sells. It's an old school truck. Again, back then in the 90s, it was still using 80s technology. It had to compete with the Toyota Tacoma. And if you know anything about Toyota Tacomas, those things are legendary. You're never going to find a better vehicle than a Toyota Tacoma. And so competing against the Tacoma was very hard. On top of that, we had things like the CAFE standards coming up, which depending on the wheelbase, the smaller the wheelbase, the better gas mileage you needed to have. And so this small wheelbase type of truck needed to grow larger and larger. Again, this is a topic for another video. But needless to say, this is not a very competitive product back in the late 90s, and they suffered for it. Finally, the 240SX, rear-wheel drive. It was a bit expensive back then. Again, rear-wheel drive, it was a sports car. Unfortunately, us car enthusiasts don't understand this all the time, but sports cars just don't sell well, especially if you're trying to sell a sports car to the regular mainstream consumer, where they just need a car to get to work and back, and they don't want really excitement. A rear-wheel drive sports car in the late 90s just was never going to sell well. And when an enthusiast was trying to buy a sports car, they really wanted something that they can afford, and they would usually go to the Mustang, or if they could really afford it, they would go for a Supra, which, by the way, also sold terribly back in the late 90s. And it just didn't work. Again, the pricing was way off. And one of the things I'll mention here briefly was that in the mid 90s, the yen, the yen is the currency that the Japanese use. The value of the yen went too high compared to the value of the dollar, forcing Japanese companies that exported their cars from Japan to raise their prices of the Japanese cars in order to keep competitive. That killed off a lot of the Japanese sports cars that we love today, the Mazda RX-7, the Toyota Supra, the 240SX, and other cars like that. And so at the end of the day, they did not have a compelling catalog of cars, and so they just needed a bailout, and Renault came to the rescue. Now, if you go back in time, if I was a late 20s, early 30s dude back in 1995, you might have found me in a Nissan 200SX, which is effectively a Sentra with a limited slip differential and some nice goodies. That's a pretty cool car to me, right? And this is kind of an old school review from Car and Driver, and I found this car to be very compelling. But again, they didn't really have that mainstream appeal outside of the Altima and the Maxima, and that really wasn't selling that well. Now, fast forward to the problems of today. Why is Nissan in trouble today? And a lot of that has to do with the fact that after Renault bought out Nissan, the whole reason for doing so was to stick Renault technology into Nissan's cars. So an example is that, the biggest example is that Nissan transmissions were old. They were old 4-speed automatics, and most cars were being sold as automatics. People went away from buying stick shift. They wanted the automatic cars, and Nissan's technology just needed upgrading. However, instead of making a better 6-speed auto or 8-speed auto, Renault said, hey, we developed this cool transmission called the continuously variable transmission. We've developed it already. It works pretty well in Europe. Put them in your cars. And so they did. And so effectively since 2003 or 4, every or almost every Nissan started carrying the CVTs, the very terrible CVTs. And if you know anything about me and CVTs, I hate CVTs. I really hate. I don't even want them in my side by sides. That's how badly I hate them. And it's just because of the design. There's almost, in my opinion, designed to break. Let me give you an example. We're gonna take a look at one of my favorite YouTubers. His name is Speed Car here, and I'll show you guys. So there's his YouTube channel, Speed Car. Let's take a listen as to what a CVT really is.
Really dirty video. I'm gonna use a pry bar. Holy crap, that's heavy.
So here he is taking it
so
apart.
Here we have the heart of the continuously
And there's
variable
the insides of a
transmission.
continuously variable
Pulley,
transmission.
and this one is the output pulley. It's got this gear on it that's going to interface with the intermediate gear and then the differential. Now connecting the two pulleys is a steel belt, which has to be flexible enough to go around these pulleys, yet strong enough to transfer the torque. Now taking a look from the side, the way this continuously variable transmission is going to vary.
So that's the belt, and that's the conical system. So let's hear from Speed Car himself. What breaks these on these things, and why are they breaking so much?
Of the cone over here so that it can freely move up and down. So now that we've taken apart this Nissan CVT, let's take a look at some of the failure modes, starting of course with this belt, which is probably the weakest link in this system here. Now this is just a steel band. It's no hard gears like in a manual transmission or even planetary gears like in an automatic transmission, and transferring too much torque to one of these could eventually cause it to fail itself. Now one of the worst things is that Nissan's chosen to attach this to higher powered vehicles. CVTs are mostly known for lightweight vehicles such as economy cars, but for some reason they chose to pair the VQ35 and of course wear and tear. Now variator, all of a sudden CVTs do generate a lot of heat because you do have this belt system, and if the cooling system can't keep up and the transmission fluid can't absorb the heat, well then all of a sudden you have parts that start to disintegrate and wear out much faster because they're at much higher temperatures and they just self-disintegrate. Now one of the telltale signs of CVT failures is a whining sound. They definitely.
Thank you, Speed Car. As you can see, sticking the CVT transmissions into everything that Nissan made effectively made Nissan's reputation for durability and being a good Japanese brand evaporate. They had great engines. That Nissan V6 engine is great. I'm not a big fan of the V6 architecture. I think the V6s are a compromised engine already. It's just a design flaw in my opinion. But they make really good V6s. The VQ engine that's in the G35s and the G37s of the Infiniti, right? It's just a Nissan brand. All those engines do really well. The CVTs that they pair them with, though, just awful, awful, awful. And then most recently, they actually developed a new type of cylinder deactivation with variable displacement engines. And you don't want more moving parts in your engine. You want less. And already there's reliability problems with those. So you're taking the only real thing that Nissan had. So Nissan really was only known for two things: great motorsports with their GTRs and their, the Spec Vs and the SCRs, and having that four-door, Ford DSC, the four-door sports car, being the Maxima with the big, powerful V6. They took those things plus the reliability factor and just deleted them completely by putting the CVTs in there and making these engines be terrible. And now there's a big push towards electrification, and none of it is working, obviously. You saw the financials. Nissan's in trouble. So what could this merger mean for folks like me that love Honda but want Honda to improve and increase their profit margins? Let's take a look at Nissan's current offerings, and first of all see why no one's buying them, and then second of all see what Honda could possibly buy off of them. And so if you look at their crossovers and SUVs, they're the staple of every American family. Nissan Kicks is an inexpensive SUV. Honda makes a much better HRV in my opinion, and the CRV hybrid is just like a universe better than the Nissan Kicks, but it is cheap. It does use that CVT though. I wouldn't recommend it. The Rogue, again, the CVT. Pathfinder, they ruined it with the CVT. The Ira is an electric car that most Americans don't want to buy, especially at 40 grand. And the Murano is effectively a more stylized Nissan Rogue. Again, the CVT ruins it, and the Armada It's a huge car. Actually, that's the first vehicle that Honda may be able to utilize because Honda doesn't have a big frame, body on frame type of car or just a giant vehicle. The biggest car they make is the Pilot and the Ridgeline. The Armada might be something to look into. Just imagine Honda building a better Nissan Armada. How cool would that be? Maybe stick a Honda V6, which we know is pretty reliable, and making it rear-wheel drive and just putting that Mercedes, the Jatco 9-speed Mercedes transmission. So in case you guys don't know, Nissan owns the Jatco company, a Japanese automatic transmission company. That's what it stands for. And they've licensed the Mercedes-Benz 9-speed automatic. They've been building that, and that's what they put into the Nissan Frontiers, which is the pickup truck for the rear-wheel drive architecture. Honda could take all of that intellectual property and utilize it to make something really cool, like even a 2-liter turbo Armada would be cool. I think a Type R Armada. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. What else can it do, right? So if we go back to the main page, we can fix the Pathfinder again. That's a front-wheel drive architecture now, which I think they screwed up. But it's a front-wheel drive architecture. We could effectively stick the Honda Pilot drivetrain in there and fix the issues with it. That's all you need to do. It'll still be a differentiated product. It'll just be Japaneseified or, made reliable. I think that'll be great. We'll skip the electric vehicles because who cares? The cars, there's nothing really here I would save. I mean, the Versa, it's kind of cool. Maybe you can look into it. A Versa manual would be nice, right, to own. It's the cheapest car, I believe, in America. However, Honda makes a Civic. It's a better car altogether. The Sentra, again, Honda makes a Civic, Honda makes the Accord. They'll just scrap that altogether. Altima's a little interesting. Altima has its own kind of buyer base. There's a lot of Altima memes online. So maybe Altima can be reconfigured with Honda powertrains and fixed. But we'll skip the cars because there's not much there. We'll come back to the trucks. The sports cars, this is where it gets interesting. So as you guys may or may not know, the GTR is being discontinued. So it'd be cool if Honda would take over Nissan and use the NSX drivetrain, right? The new Acura NSX drivetrain with the V6 hybrid turbo, and stick this put it into something like a GTR. Take that chassis, develop it a little bit, put it in the GTR, and hey, we have a R36 GTR, powered by Honda. That would be amazing. Then you look at the Nissan Z. That would be the most interesting chassis in my opinion, because this could be the opportunity that Honda could be waiting for to make the newest S2000. Can you guys imagine a 2-liter turbo Type R engine with a 6-speed manual mated to a rear-wheel drive chassis like the Z car, and have the chassis gone through by Honda engineers and Honda performance engineers? Man, I would be very interested to see how Honda could do something like that. That would be a cool car. So we got possibly the Altima, definitely the Armada, and let's look at the trucks. So again, the Nissan Titan is being discontinued this year, but I think it would be an opportunity for Honda to finally build a full-size pickup truck. Now, Honda would have an issue because the drivetrains that Honda has won't necessarily fit in, but Honda did start to make a V8 engine this year that's sold to the public, but you could only buy it for a boat. They're on their outboard motors. There's a new V8 out there for Honda. It's a nice one. Take that, make it for the streets, put it in a Titan, Honda V8 powered Titan XD or Titan. That would sell pretty well in my opinion. I mean, I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments, but that would sell pretty well. Then you have the Frontier, right? You stick a 2-liter turbo from like the Honda Accord, or even just the V6 from Honda. The V6 from Honda is, I think, a better and more efficient V6 than the Nissan's V6. You replace that, put that 9-speed Mercedes transmission behind it, call it a day, make some Honda improvements to the interior. That would be an amazing partnership. And finally, let's close it up here with, I think that because of the pickup trucks, the body-on-frame SUVs, and the sports cars, it would be pretty cool to see Honda pick up Nissan for those reasons. But also, in case you guys also may not know, the Japanese government always encourages its internal big companies to help out the smaller companies that are failing. For example, Toyota has always been asked by the Japanese government to help out companies like Daihatsu and Mazda more recently. Anytime there's a company with financial issues, the Japanese government gets involved and says, hey, we need to preserve Japanese jobs. Go save your company. Go save your brother's company. Go save your cousin's company. Go save a Japanese company by injecting capital into them, by giving them technology or selling them technology or merging with them, etc. And so I think all of that is pretty cool. And I'm excited for a possibility of Nissan and Honda merging forces and joining together like that. Let me know what you guys thought of that concept. Let me know what you guys think about this video format. So this is the end of the video here. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy this because I like making videos like this. It's really interesting to me. I spend a lot of time on this stuff anyway, so I might as well share it with you guys. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time. Peace.